Hi, Abby. Hi, Yan. Wow, we got everyone from all over all the countries. So we're gonna start in a couple minutes. I'm waiting for some more participants to tune in. Oh, Emlyn. Wow, from the UAE. Welcome, welcome. Amen. Okay. I'm in. Okay, so I think we get many audiences here already. So it's time to start our event. Okay, let's get started. So good morning and good afternoon to all the audiences tuning in from all over the world. Welcome to AI in Climate Change. So when thinking about solutions to tackle climate change, people often think of renewable energy, green materials, and hardware, and digital solutions like platforms, marketplace, and AI are often overlooked. In this event, we would like to introduce you more about the possibility of AI in tackling climate change. This event is sponsored by the Irish Embassy in Vietnam and hosted by Earth Venture Capital. We are a venture capital fund that invests in climate tech startups globally. Besides that, we are actively recruiting founders to co new ventures. There are only 3 days left to apply, and you can find out more in the chat box. Now, I would like to welcome our fantastic guest speakers, Pia Faustino and David Lau. Pia Faustino is the director of Thinking Machine, a technology consultancy building AI and data platforms that solve impact problems. Pia also has worked various AI projects with leading social academic institutions. A few worthy mentions are the Understanding Poverty in the Philippines with Artificial Intelligence Project with UNPD and the Conservation International Thinking Machines Project with Arizona University that wants the Climate Change AI Innovation Grants. Yeah, could you please turn on your camera and say hi to the audience?
Hi, everyone. Happy to be here today.
Okay, I will get back to you in a minute. And equally impressed, our guest speaker, David, is the founder of GainForest, a nonprofit grantee of Microsoft AI's for Earth program. David is a leading researcher at Zurich, Stanford, and MIT on multiple AI projects, such as the Climate AI Initiative, the ethical use of data, and Kara Search. He's also an active and valuable member of the World Economic Forum, Climate Reality Project, and Creative Destruction Lab. Warm welcome to David. David, can you turn on your camera and unmute and say hi to the audience?
Hi, pleasure to be here.
Okay, great, awesome. So today's event will kickstart with two insightful presentations, AI in farming and agriculture from Pia and AI in forestry from David. And after that, Pia and David will have more sharings on the intersection of AI and climate change. Before turning over to our guest speakers, I would like to get down to the basics first. So many of us probably hear the terms climate change, AI applications in climate change daily as their buzzwords, but what are they really? So I think that to understand what climate change is, we have to understand the term climate first. So unlike weather, which is just a short-term variation of the atmosphere that can be observed from minutes to days, climate actually reflects the pattern of the average weather over a long period of time, let's say 30 years. And climate change is a change in the average weather pattern over time. AI is short for artificial intelligence that refers to system of machines that mimic human intelligence to perform tasks and can iteratively improve themselves based on the information they collect. So some common AI in tech climate change, including migration. We have the electric city system, transportation, buildings and cities, industry, agriculture, forestry, the land use, we have carbon dioxide removal. And for the adaptation, we have the climate predictions, reducing societal impacts, and solar geoengineering. So now, going to the exciting part of today's event. Welcome to our first presentation, Eco-Intelligence, Harnessing Data Science for a Climate Smart Food System by Pia Faustino. Over to you, Pia.
Yeah, thank you so much for that introduction. So let me just quickly share my screen. Okay. Yeah, so thank you so much for the introduction. Super happy and excited to share with all of you some of the experiences that my team and I have had in trying to figure out how to apply our capabilities in AI and data science, kind of join the fight against climate change. So I'll be speaking today about some of the projects that we have done that address emissions and emissions from our food sector, right? So harnessing AI for climate smart food systems. But first, a quick introduction about our company. So Thinking Machines Data Science, we are a technology consultancy that builds custom data tools for organizations that want to make data-driven decisions. So we're based in the Philippines, but we also have operations and teams out in Thailand and Singapore. We're about 7 years old. We have a team of now 130 and going strong data scientists, software engineers, designers, business strategists, etc. So we're kind of a Swiss Army knife of data science capabilities, and we really specialize in helping organizations from all different sectors really operationalize what it means to use data for action. And we've worked with organizations across different sectors, from development agencies to nonprofits to some of the biggest corporations in Southeast Asia. And for the past now year and a half, we have made a commitment really as a company to play a role in the fight against climate change, like I mentioned. So we formed a sustainability team, and that is a team that I lead as Director for Social Impact and Sustainability at Thinking Machines. And our idea is, how can we as an organization operate more sustainably ourselves? How can we use our capabilities to enable our clients to also reduce their harm and adapt to the climate impacts? And how do we just influence anybody around us, our industry, our peers, to do the same? And why have we made a commitment as a company? So I'm sharing a news article from a few months ago. There's a huge typhoon, a super typhoon, that ravaged the Philippines back in December. It was called Typhoon Odette. I don't recall the international name, but over like a good portion of our country, maybe like 1/3 or a half of the country was deeply affected by this. And houses were damaged, agricultural crops were damaged. People lost so much in this, and the agricultural sector, as you can imagine, is one of the most vulnerable to extreme weather events. And so, and the Philippines is still primarily an agricultural country, right? And as climate change is getting worse, we're going to see stronger, more devastating extreme weather events moving forward, which is really worrisome. Literally, our team is literally affected by this. I think we had a few team members who didn't have electricity for several days after this event, and it's something that directly affects us. So agriculture is vulnerable, or food production is vulnerable to the effects of climate change, but at the same time, it's also a contributor to climate change. Many people don't realize, when we think of emissions, we think of fossil fuel burning. But actually, a good portion of emissions come from how we're using our land. And in Southeast Asia, this is especially true. In Southeast Asia, we actually have a bigger proportion of our emissions coming from agriculture and land use than electricity, actually. So if we're going to reduce our emissions here in Southeast Asia, while also trying to improve lives for everyone, we really need to figure out how do we balance the interests of protecting nature and feeding people. Oops. So that's where the concept of climate smart food production comes in, right? So when we say climate smart food production, it's basically climate solutions that hit 3 goals. One is you create more food. So we have to feed more people, right? It's just more and more people. The population is increasing, and our natural resources are also getting more stressed. But at the same time, how do you actually lower the emissions of that food while also increasing the resilience of our food systems to the extreme impacts of climate change? So you can imagine that's you have to achieve all of these goals at the same time. The good news is there's a lot of solutions out there that can hit all of those goals. You have different ways of producing rice, different ways of managing the soil, etc. So how do we actually scale out all of these systems and make sure they're implemented as soon as possible, right? And of course, you can't do that without data. So if we're going to achieve all of these very, very challenging goals, how do we arm all of the players in the system? The food producers themselves, farmers, policymakers, scientists, nonprofits, academics. How do we give them the information that they need in order to achieve this, right? So they need to know what are the interventions that are best suited for different locations and conditions. How do I actually measure carbon, right? Carbon that's being emitted as a result of different agricultural activities. How do I know what the trade-offs are between different ways of using land? And then how do you actually understand what are the possible risks to our agricultural systems because of climate change? And how do you monitor those changing conditions? So these three goals, you can't achieve them without data. So at Thinking Machines, one of our capabilities that we've been really honing over the past several years is to use AI to generate geospatial data and customized maps to help support data-driven decisions. Before the past year, most of our projects have involved using AI to generate up-to-date maps of buildings and infrastructure, of socioeconomic data, such as average household wealth, etc. But most recently, we've discovered there are so many use cases of using AI to map natural resources. So I want to share about one particular project that involves this. For the past few months now, we've been working with the conservation nonprofit Conservation International to use AI-powered mapping to help them scale up a program that is called the Climate Smart Shrimp Program. I think what most people don't really realize when we hear about food production causing deforestation, maybe you read a lot about beef, right? Livestock raising around the world is actually causing the destruction of forests. But actually here in Southeast Asia, one of the key causes of the destruction of mangrove forests is aquaculture. And mangroves, this is a huge problem because mangrove ecosystems are incredibly valuable. They sequester huge amounts of carbon. And at the same time, Southeast Asia is home to over a third of the world's mangrove forests, right? So this is something that's very, very special that exists in our region of the world. And 1 hectare of mangrove, I've read that it can actually store 4 or 5 times as much carbon as a terrestrial forest. So they're super, super they're blue carbon powerhouses, basically. And at the same time, they have all of these other benefits, right? Mangrove forests, they are biodiversity hotspots. They protect us from extreme weather events, coastal flooding, storm surges, improve water quality and livelihoods. Like I mentioned, so much of mangroves have been damaged or degraded because of the need to produce food using aquaculture, right? And because of increasing human settlements. So this program that Conservation International has developed tries to solve both of those challenges of, yes, people need food, but how do we actually produce the same amount of food or even more food while also restoring the mangroves, right? So the idea with Climate Smart Shrimp is if we can actually help low production shrimp farmers increase their yield, like produce more shrimp using less land, maybe the rest of the land that they don't need anymore can be actually replanted instead of mangroves. And so the idea is, can we address the food issue first, and then we try to restore the ecosystems that have been lost. So what we've done is we've been working with them for the past couple of months to figure out how to scale this program across Southeast Asia. So there's so many aquaculture farms across the entire region. Vietnam, I believe, is also one of the top producers of aquaculture. And yet, they have to be very smart about how they roll out this program. It won't work everywhere. So they need to find the locations that meet all of the criteria for what a good climate smart shrimp program would look like. Or what it requires. So there's different criteria, like, okay, they're looking for places that have some risk to flooding, places that have historical mangrove cover, because those are places that if you were to plant mangroves, it would do well. But there are some features here that cannot easily be derived from data. So for example, how productive is shrimp pond? Is it like a high-tech, super high yield fish pond, or is it kind of a low tech, very large fish pond? And is the fish pond operational or not, right? So these kinds of features, this is where actually the AI comes in. So using computer vision, we can actually generate this data from satellite imagery and add that extra layer of insight into their decision making. So for example, there's certain visual features of shrimp ponds that make it preferable or not preferable. So just showing you some examples on the left, you have shrimp ponds that have a lot of, you can see those white swirls. Those are actually signs of the equipment that they're using on the shrimp pond. And then on the right, it's an example of a shrimp pond that's not quite high tech yet, and therefore it should be targeted for this program. Just skip over the rest, but just to be mindful of time. But the point is that this program is super interesting because it's trying to solve the food issue and the restoration issue at the same time. And I think the power of AI here is in accelerating the decision-making process, making sure that these programs really use their resources wisely. You know, there's only so much money right now, unfortunately not enough money right now going into nature-based solutions. And so every dollar that gets spent, every hour that gets spent has to be really wisely done. So we want to make sure that these organizations have data that they need to really make the most impact that they can. Okay, so I think I'm gonna just stop there. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thanks a lot, Pia, for the insightful presentation and the beautiful geospatial maps. You know, I always find these satellite heat maps to be fascinating. So, we have a question from Vietnam. Hi, Pia. Can you give us an example on how data is processed and analyzed that led you make a decision?
Yes. So like I showed earlier, there's numerous criteria that the program developers at Conservation International need in order to decide, hey, should we consider this site for the program? Actually, right now, they're in the stage of trying to choose pilot sites for the program, and they're trying to understand what is the potential scale of this program throughout Southeast Asia. So what we do is, for all of the criteria, we find open geospatial data sets that represent each of those criteria. And then what we've done is we've worked with them to develop some I guess, simple rules in a way of, okay, if this particular area meets, you know, 3 or 4 of your criteria, right? What's the next action? The next action should be for you to actually send someone on the ground to actually check it out more, right? And subject it to further evaluation. So we actually layer all of those different data sets, and then we work with the domain experts to try to understand. Basically, we're trying to codify their domain expertise into code, literally codify it, right, into rules that would yield a kind of a score for every area, and that gives them a signal about what areas they should prioritize investing more time into evaluating.
Yeah. Another question from Annie. Do you like to ask what are some common limitations you stumble upon in using this method in identifying these areas?
Yeah, great question. So one is working on real world challenges like this is also very humbling for technologists, right? As much as we want to believe that, you know, that data can tell you all the answers, there's just certain things that maps can't tell you. So for example, so the limitations of this approach are these maps cannot tell us where the communities are more open to doing mangrove restoration. So you have to have buy-in from these aquaculture communities, from these communities living in and around the mangroves, in order for this program to be successful. And there's just no way to tell that from the sky, right? You really got to go there on the ground and talk to these people. Some of the other data blind spots that we're seeing are land tenure. So who owns the land, right? Who has rights to use the land? Sometimes those management operational concerns are really the biggest blocker, no matter how physically suitable an area is for restoration. If you can't touch it because you're not legally able to, then that's a huge problem, right? So that's another data blind spot there, and that requires like working with the government to make some of this data more easily accessible and digital. I see there's also a question about ground truthing. Yeah, so we're actually working now with CI to kind of include some of the validation that they've been doing on the ground. So they're actually sending people to some of these potential sites and really checking out the site, really talking to the community there, really seeing if the elevation and the slope is good, really validating what kind of shrimp farming methods are being used there. So this tool it's not meant to replace ground truthing at all. It's just meant to make sure that if they're going to do ground truthing, there better be a really, really good chance that this place is, a promising one, right? So the ground truthing is essential to leading to action here.
Okay, awesome. Thanks a lot, Pia. And now I would like to welcome our second guest speaker, David Dow, with utilizing AI to restart the natural world. Welcome, David.
Thank you so much for the invitation. So let's get right into the topic. It's very similar to what Pia discussed, but it goes into a more scientific perspective. But let's get first again, because it can be said enough, the importance of nature for our for a lot of the problems we face. So currently, when we look at the satellite data, which is again very beautiful to look at, but also very frightening, because if you look at past satellite data and satellite data now, we can see that the natural world has been deteriorating rates unparalleled in human history. And these are not my words. These are the words from the Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystems, which is the United Nations' highest level of scientific advisors telling literally the world leaders, hey, we're really messing up right now. We lost, and literally what that means is we lost, since industrial ages, half of all the world's forests have ever existed. That comes with huge, huge consequences. One, of course, Pia mentioned already, is the emissions. So she also included agriculture, but if you move away agriculture, if you just look at deforestation itself, tropical deforestation happening in Indonesia, in Paraguay, Brazil, that if that would be a country, and that would be basically sitting as one of the negotiators of climate change, this country is the third largest emitter right after the US and China. So tropical deforestation is that immensely large in emissions and plays a huge role. But it also is a huge, huge problem for people who live there, because, like, again, so many people, especially in Southeast Asia, depend on forests as a livelihood, right? They have farms, agriculture, the medicine comes from it. And even further, indigenous people live in forests, and illegal deforestation basically also risks them getting hurt. Biodiversity is the twin crisis of the climate crisis. So we talk a lot about climate, but not everyone knows that we're actually right now also in the sixth mass extinction caused by humanity itself and a deterioration of nature. So, for example, we're losing a big cat every 15 years. Like lions used to, before humanity, used to be 500,000 and more. And now with humanity involved, lions, the last couple times we measured them, we are only counting 20,000. So we're taking a lot of their habitats away, and that causes not only a climate crisis, but also a crisis of general life and animals. But there's hope. Scientists, especially people in the restoration movement, have been using satellite data to estimate, okay, we lost half of the trees we ever existed, right? Because of cities, because of farmland. But if in theory, where are the places we can still replant and renature our world? And it turns out there's still space for 1 trillion trees, which potentially could absorb a lot of carbon emissions. And scientists from our lab as well, had created these global maps where you can show, okay, these are areas where you can still plant the trees now. Lastly, I want to really look into the data, because the data is really the crucial part in making all these nice things and good things happening, right? Artificial algorithms that could potentially predict and preserve nature, There are 4 fundamental data levels out there. There's field-based monitoring data, people walking in the field, measuring trees. Satellite-based monitoring, the images I just showed you. Drone-based monitoring, basically very similar to satellites, but even with a higher resolution. You fly a drone, you capture forest cover. And genomic monitoring, a new field called environmental DNA, where you basically take a sample of the soil or of the air itself, you sequence, and you can measure how many living beings are in this forest, in this area. To give you a big picture, how does AI play a role when it comes to protecting nature? So on the left side, we really want to reverse deforestation, right? We want to stop the destruction of nature. On the right side, in order to stop it, we need to pay people, because like no change is going to happen if there's no money involved to make it happen, right? Like we need to finance restoration efforts, we need to create sustainable businesses that replace these destructive businesses right now. We cannot just tell a farmer, okay, stop living. We need to provide him an alternative. And in between that is AI. Basically, in order to release all these finances that have been pledged by donors, by investors, by the United Nations, there's a key component that is called MRV, monitoring, reporting, and verification, basically telling, okay, how impactful was your project actually? Can I really trust that you've been like doing what you're doing, right? It's like some kind of a police that checks it. And here, AI can be applied on this monitoring, reporting, verification on 3 different levels. First, we can use satellite images to do deforestation driver prediction, train a neural network on satellite images, and let the neural network predict why the forest is getting destroyed right now. Is it plantation? Is it agriculture? Is it wildfire? And then the next one is we can use the same algorithm to protect forests by predicting where in the future people are most likely to cut down the forest. Many lands and countries have very limited amounts of rangers. So by having a risk factor, risk area zone for forests, we can basically allocate these rangers much more efficiently, protecting nature by itself more efficiently. Lastly, restoring, replanting forests is not that easy as putting just a tree in, because like just putting a tree in, usually a survival rate of a tree, if you just put it in, is about less than 10 to 15%. So it's basically gone. So really what you need to make sure is, okay, how can I plant the right trees, the right species at the right location with the right temperature? And here also AI can help give you these predictions. And also in terms of collecting data, artificial intelligence can be used to leverage this very tedious way of collecting data right now. Right now, we are basically measuring like trees with like a length band. And here we developed, for example, at ETH Zurich, an app that you can just hold a credit card in front of the trunk and then take a picture. And then an AI algorithm in the phone is going to tell you how big this tree is, calculating the carbon, calculating the species, without you having to bring this domain knowledge or bring any tooling. And also, we can also provide you with a financial estimate of how much carbon is stored in your forest that is immediately linked to a certain price that people can then acquire finances for. So if you look at the data really, here, for example, these are 2 of the most common data points. On the left side, you see satellite data of a place in Brazil, of a plantation you work at. Satellite data usually is public data. Sentinel-2 is from the European Space Agency. Landsat data is from NASA. And these are 10 meters per pixel, and this is roughly what it looks like. You cannot really see a single tree, but you do see greening areas. And these greening areas can tell investor, can tell like decision makers, this project is right now doing what it's doing. On the right side, this is commercial data, Maxar, Planet Labs. Commercial satellite data and drone data can get much higher resolution. Here, 50 centimeters per pixel, where you can even see a single tree. And the beautiful thing about, and the big challenge of current satellite data, for example, for machine learning, is that it's there, it's a lot, and it comes in irregular time steps. So we see the changes I showed you in the first slide, right? But it's really, really challenging for a machine learning engineer's perspective, because you have to not only deal with what's the right AI model to use here, but actually a lot of data engineering. How do we store that amount of data? How do we process that amount of data? And how do we like clean up all the data issues that could potentially come in, like clouds, like a wrong image, like wrong lights and colors. That is actually takes 99% of the work. So the AI model itself, training it is only 1%, cleaning up the data, making and managing it is 99% of the work. So I don't really want to make sure that I mention one last thing before we really hail AI as the silver bullet to solve climate change, because it is not. So there are many, many companies, Pachama, NCX, Natural Systems, and GainForest, the startup I founded, that uses AI to predict deforestation, monitor area, and issue carbon credits, which is a currency that is used to get finances. But recent research from our side as well showed that these AI algorithms, if trained poorly, can be very wrong in areas, especially in the global south. So this is an area, for example, we measured hand by hand every single tree in Ecuador, and we've seen that the AI models overestimate the number of trees and the number of carbon stored by a factor of 10, which is just not trustworthy enough for the financial market and could be also very harmful for the communities that live there. Because we also realized that the same AI algorithm doesn't predict that badly for US sites, for sites in Europe. And the reason is most likely that there's not enough data in very remote areas like Southeast Asia's rainforest, Brazil's Amazon rainforest, but much more data, for example, for managed forests in the US. So I want to lastly conclude with some key points when you do AI for nature, when you do AI for these purposes. First of all, make sure and understand that the data you have is always biased, because rich countries have a lot of data, poor countries don't have a lot of data, and your AI algorithms will monitor and reflect these biases, even for satellite data. Satellite data is by itself also quite biased. And then you have, we need to make sure that we have to tackle this challenge, how to create transparent, open, and trusted algorithms. And last but not least, and super important, always, when you work with AI algorithms, design them with the people who live in the area you want to work with, right? If it's a forest that you want to protect, talk to the local communities and understand, is that deforestation that is happening, or is that just a wildfire? That maybe your satellite image, because for your satellite image, it looks the same. It's gonna be forest or no forest, but only people in the local communities understand that, what's really happening. And this is where you also have to talk to them. Because in the end, if you develop an algorithm, a tool, without the involvement of the people who should use it, no one's going to use it. So make sure that you really also, when you work on these, look into data standards like fair, findable, accessible, interoperable, reusable data, but also make sure that you care. So make sure that your AI algorithms are collectively beneficial. The data is not taken without consent from communities, and it should be ethical, of course. So with that, thank you very much for listening, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, David. The time-lapse video of how our Greenland decreased rapidly in the 3.5 decades really struck me, and I'm sure many of the audiences here found the same way. So is there any question from our audience for David? Okay, if there's no questions, I would like to invite you to our, oh yeah, sorry, I kind of missed some of the questions. So Vina has a question. What are the criteria that you must take into account to create a good MRV algorithm?
That's actually a fantastic question. I think the best MRV algorithm is an open one. So an algorithm that is auditable for people. Many algorithms right now are not. So, and there are different kind of ways of access of an algorithm, right? Because you want to make sure no algorithm is going to be perfect. All algorithms are biased, all algorithms have some mistakes. You want to understand what's the data that it is trained on. So the data should be open. And what is the model? What are the weights of it? So because MRV is about monitoring and reporting, you want to also make sure that the monitor and reporter is being monitored and reported as well. So opening up the algorithm is a very first start. And then of course, we call them data hygiene practices. Make sure that you clean up your data, make sure that you collect a representative sample of data, make sure to talk to communities before you deploy these algorithms and let them test them such that they can give you feedback of potentially harmful predictions which they are wrong. And also one of the good things, very important things for ML algorithms is how do we communicate the result from the algorithm properly and understandably to people. So don't just give, for example, forest or not forest, give uncertainties. Okay, my algorithm is not very sure that this is a forest, but maybe it is. So be very, very clear with your predictions, and that makes it the algorithm.
So another question from GR. Will AI-based carbon estimation be standardized in a couple of years? And is that possible?
Yes. So standards are already on the way. Right now, the voluntary carbon marketplace is voluntary. So there are multiple standards fighting to be the standard. Vera, gold standard, Pachama, NCX, they all create their own AI-based standards. It's up to the market to trust which one will be the most trustworthy one. But from the voluntary market side, we already have AI standards now, created by companies, created by nonprofits. From a regulatory standpoint, like from a government standpoint, I believe we will have one standard as well that comes. So right now, the United Nations is working on something called Article 6 that is trying to create a global carbon marketplace, should be arriving in the next 2 to 5 years, depending on how fast these delegates are working. And then there, the standard discussion is a huge topic as well. So I believe it will potentially result in one standard that is kept quite fishy in order to make sure that different kind of AI algorithms can be put in, but it will be something out there.
Okay, thank you. And now I would like to invite everyone to join our panel discussion with our guest speakers. So the first question I have for you two, both David and Pia, is how did you get interested in AI and climate change in the first place? Do you get interested in AI first, or is that like climate change first? Do you did you really want to combat climate change and how that AI was like the most useful tool? So over to you, David.
So I watched the movie called back in 2007, it came out, called An Inconvenient Truth from Al Gore, and that really shocked me. So as a high school student, also my family's originally from Vietnam. We have a lot of, like, the area where we're from has a lot of rainforests, right? So this is something that especially like was very personal to me. And over the years, I just got interested in, okay, in my second very discipline, which is AI. And I try to see always, okay, I'm studying computer science, I'm studying AI right now. This is like, of course, the study you have to do because your parents would not approve you not doing something engineering. But always in mind, okay, we do have a huge problem right now, like there is climate change. And I think over the years, this interest of working specific in nature with this climate perspective, also with the biodiversity perspective, just naturally arose from my work. Also thinking about it and talking to many friends. And really the big click moment was when I was attending a climate hackathon at the United Nations Climate Change Conference back in 2017. And they asked, like, how can technology help combat climate change? And at this hackathon, which was for 5 days, we came up with our startup GainForest, which won the hackathon and made me really like pursue this basically full time.
Thank you, David. How about you, Pia?
Yeah, so my journey into this, I'm not a data scientist by training or even a computer programmer or computer scientist. Before working at Thinking Machines, I spent 9 years as a journalist. I spent 2 of those years as a journalist for a biodiversity program, a biodiversity television program in the Philippines, and 1 year as a climate change reporter. So this was way back in 2009, 2008. I even covered like the Copenhagen climate talks. And then after that, I said, I decided to make a career shift into the technology sector because I saw how technology was changing journalism, to be honest, at the time. So I moved to the data science field, was an early employee at Thinking Machines. And then, the past 7 years, I've been in the data field, right? Managing data science projects, managing data science teams. I will admit that I kind of pushed climate change to the back of my mind for many years. And then just in the last few years, since 2019, I think right after the IPCC report about the fact that we have 12 years left out of 2018, they said we have to halve emissions by 2030, right? That was very shocking to me. And I saw, all around the world, watching Greta Thunberg talk about, why is nobody panicking? and me talking about data all the time, right? I work at a data science company. I'm a former journalist. I know the facts. And yet I am operating as if everything is fine, right? And that was a kind of a wake-up call for me. Plus, I have 2 children now. I have a 6-year-old daughter. I have a 1-year-old son, and I'm living literally in one of the most climate vulnerable countries in the world. So all of those things coming together, I really went on a journey of I can't stop. I can't ignore this anymore. I have to do something about it, and that led me to try to figure out what I can do in my position at this company where I'm working with. It's filled with talented people. We have all of these data scientists who can do amazing things. Well, how can I help, not just influence what I do with my day-to-day, but what they do with their day-to-day talents and time. And so the past year has been a mission to find projects, find our place, find our niche in this fight. And I know that we can't solve it by ourselves, definitely not. Technology is just one piece of the pie here. But I also think we can't solve it without technology. So we all have a role. We all have a role to play, I think, in this ecosystem of solutions. And so that's how Thinking Machines ended up with climate projects. And I hope we'll have more. We kind of landed in this nature space, I think, because of the Philippines. We realized that's a good match for our skills, right? We have spatial data science skills. And so we've kind of landed into this space, and I think this is where we're focusing now.
Thanks a lot, Pia. And I have a question. I have different questions from our audience. One question from Haiti, Mabachera. I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing your name incorrectly. So Haiti from FinTech Machine Learning Engineer. So the question is, as someone who is interested in both climate change and data science, how would you suggest them to get into both?
So climate change and climate science or computer science is the question. What science? Or science in general?
Yeah, someone is interested in both climate change and data science, how can they get into where do they start from that?
We asked ourselves that question many years ago as well, and a group of my friends founded Climate Change AI, so climatechange.ai, which is basically my go-to answer now, because this is something we've built basically for the last 3 years now. Wow, 2 years, 3 years. I joined very, very early after the foundation of the association. And what Climate Change AI does is basically provide resources for you to get into this field. It comes from, okay, how do we catalyze meaningful work between AI and climate change? And for that, we provide one-on-one tutorials on AI, one-on-one tutorials on climate change, and organize conferences that bring both together, both parties. So for example, we are going to have a summer school very soon, that teaches lectures on forest agriculture, but also power systems, methane detection, and all of that, which you can apply. You can also join the Circle community, which is a social network which we created, which you can just reach out. The founders of the association now are both very famous scientists. Priya just became professor at MIT. David is a professor in Canada, and Lynn is a professor in Germany. So they are all very well and established scientists. But from the computer science perspective, they're moved and have a big impact now on climate change. And so this community reflects also very much their values. So I just highly recommend you to look into that and join.
Thank you. I see some questions from other audiences. So Vienna, do you want to turn on your mic and ask our guest speakers directly?
Hi. So my question is, do you think that there is enough funding to pursue good quality work and research regarding climate change?
Thank you, Vienna.
What do you think, David? It's never enough, right?
It's never enough.
There's just not enough money anywhere.
But I think it's much better than when we started, right? I feel like it's 10x when we started. Like when I started doing this, pursuing this, I had to convince people why the heck would you use your well-paid artificial intelligence knowledge on trees, right? And now I don't have to explain it anymore. So investors will understand because it's origin, it's carbon, and unfortunately we don't see a lot of progress in decision makers who are really making sure that we avert the climate crisis. So sarcastically, I have to say we'll probably get more funding even in the future because the problem is very far away from being solved, even the opposite. So I don't think you have to worry getting funding. You have to just like any kind of good funding like proposal, you need to be able to communicate well what you want to do. So make sure that when you develop or look for a research project, that we always call it at CCI, Climate Change AI, pathway to impact. How actually would that help solve climate change? How would that tackle it? What are potential issues that could arise from it? And when you be very transparent with this, I don't think you will have any problems with finding funds on this. And also at our website, we list funds. So the Climate Change AI community funds itself, project which it thinks like it's super cool, but also connect you with funders and gives you a resource on this. So I think that's my 2 cents. I don't know if you have anything to add on this.
No, I agree. I think there is more funding coming into this space. Maybe I just speak of like, because I do the fundraising work, and it's like it is quite a bit of work. And there just always needs to be more. Like I just keep reading about the big funding gaps, right? Like how much we actually need to invest in forests and nature versus how much that actually is invested. And traditionally I believe most of the funding for nature restorations come from philanthropies, it's come from government. Like unlocking the private sector funding, like we're really not there yet. It's not, and that's why David is doing all of this work to try to create transparency and credibility in the carbon credits, so we can unlock that funding. And like we at Thinking Machines, we're trying to work with organizations on the supply side who are trying to, design these projects and trying to help their projects succeed more. Because like you said, so many of these restoration projects, they're high risk, they fail, right? So how can we get the product ready, so that to bring in that capital from the private sector.
It's also very unfair, the funding, I have to say. The funding is very concentrated on Europe and America, and Silicon Valley always funds Silicon Valley itself. Yeah. So speaking to a community like yours, based mostly in Southeast Asia, you really need to make sure to reach out to those people and raise even awareness that there's something amazing happening also in this area of the world, because many of the investors, they just don't look at this area, which is a big shame, and also one of the reasons why we are not getting along in the climate crisis.
Okay, I see a long question here too. Are you muted?
Oh, I'm muted. Sorry about that. I have a question from Boyeta. So the question is, the use of AI and satellite imagery has been adopted recently in economic studies. However, it is still not known. A lot of studies that look into the impact of natural disaster on household decision-making and welfare are still using data source that is much less reliable. So how can economists that are not data engineers can handle these algorithms and large data sets?
There's a lot of no coding solutions currently coming. I think there's a foundation called Radiant Earth Foundation that has been working a lot on tools that allow many, because geospatial data is one of the hardest data to work at, even as a seasoned data engineer, because of the fact that it's so huge. The API to download it is really like, it's governmental mostly, so it's really annoying to work with it. And then it's really noisy, the cloud, different fonts, you have to read into the geospatial jargon. So Pia's answer was like, yeah, it's difficult even for seasoned data scientists to work on this type of data. So coming from some area which is not a computer science area, there has been really great work trying to make it more accessible, but I totally agree, it's absolutely not very well accessible right now. There are tools, for example, like Google Earth Engine, which you can apply for. It's a open source, a free tool from Google to use that at least takes away the loading and processing. But other than that, we are still very early age on geospatial.
I just want to add that I'm a huge fan of disciplinary collaboration, right? So, if you have a PhD in economics, there are things that that, these don't know. So I hope there will be more collaboration. That's something that I'm trying to do at Thinking Machines, actually. I'm trying to reach out to health experts, and reach out to disaster risk reduction experts and forestry experts, and trying to figure out, okay, we're data scientists. What do you need? So I hope there would be more actually. This is one suggestion I have for climate change AI. Can there be some more cross-disciplinary mingling and cross-disciplinary and cross-geography mingling as well? I think that's where the magic happens, right? When you bring the technologists in and then have them collaborate with people who have deep domain expertise, right? Because we're basically solutions looking for problems over here. The technology is solution looking for a problem. So we need people who have deep domain expertise and really deeply understand what problems need solving, so we can figure out where tech can play a role. So I would just say mingle with some data scientists, go to events like this and chat with them. Maybe you can start the collaboration first before trying to do it all yourself and do it hands-on yourself. Yeah.
Other questions from Hantu. So what are something that private sector could do to combat climate change?
Reduce emissions and be serious about it, and only buy offsets after you've done everything you can to reduce. David?
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. Offsets should, honestly, certificates should only be 10% of the solution, because 90% really needs to reduce emissions, right? So I totally agree with Pia. Be serious about that.
No, it's not cannot be business as usual. I think we're fighting against status quo versus radical transformation of business. And so we have to realize that status quo is a dangerous path. And that's very scary businesses for everybody, right? But we need some real leadership from business, from everybody. Yeah.
Another question from Pooja. So the carbon market are very underpriced currently. also nature-based solution have issues. How do you see these challenges being addressed?
This is a fantastic question. And the question relates on the fact that sometimes you can pay 50 cents for a ton, and that is not okay. So the voluntary carbon market is a donation market. There are no rules from governments. So every NGO gives basically its own standard, whereas putting its own standards out, Gold Standards putting its own standards out. And these standards are oftentimes not very robust. And that results into, like, for example, companies being able to sell their verified carbon credit for 50 cents. It should not be okay, because like Shell should not be able to buy 50 cents per ton to say they are a carbon neutral company now, which is insane. So the task of AI here is to really not make these carbon credits more cheaper, but more expensive, providing more transparency, trust, monitoring, which also costs, of course. But with that, you make sure that the area you're protecting is actually protecting. Additionality is a fantastic example for that. For example, additionality, for people who don't know, is how much does this forest actually bring in carbon credits? For example, if I protect a forest that is in the middle of the rainforest where no one will ever cut, of course, you're not helping anyone, because like this forest is already protected. Why would I buy it, right? So we really need to look into areas where there's a high risk of deforestation, a high risk of failure, a high risk of emissions. And there we need models to predict this. AI models can only do half the way. We need also experts to look at it. We need many AI models to give different kind of predictions. And that increases the trust in the certificate and also raises the price. It shouldn't get cheap.
And the last question for today from Benedict is, what are your thoughts on the cost of developing AI solutions versus the benefit it brings to, like climate change or agriculture or forestry?
Yeah, I can try that if it's okay. I mean, because so at Pinky Machines, we're a consulting firm, right? And so we get a lot of, we are frequently in the situation of organizations coming to us and asking, what can AI do? How can I use AI? They're super excited about it, right? And but we definitely, AI is not the best solution for everything. And it is, admittedly, it's expensive, it's difficult, it can be risky also. It can often be very experimental. I mean, like hiring geospatial data scientists is like, it takes a lot of resources, right? And so we definitely do not recommend throwing AI at every problem. For example, in the case of when is it good to consider using geospatial machine learning to extract data from satellite imagery? When you have to get data at an incredibly wide scale, like you need to process like an entire country's worth of data, or three countries, like a whole region's worth of data. If that is the case, then maybe it would be cost effective to look into using machine learning algorithms. But if you're just, let's say, looking at one village or one place, and it's actually cost effective to draw manual maps, like label imagery manually for your particular use case, then you shouldn't be looking at AI is not cost effective, right? So I think it's helpful when you have to deal with large geographic areas, when you have to have data that's frequently updating. Like it's not enough for you to have like one map every 5 years. You're looking at fast changing data that needs to be updated every 3 months or every month, right? Or even every week or something. And it's just not scalable for human beings to do that. That's when AI can help. So like I tell AI it sounds like a magical robot, but I actually like to use an analogy. It's more like a tireless intern. Like AI is very good at accelerating and scaling up kind of like repeatable, like tasks that are very boring and repeatable. And that's what you should use AI for. But we don't recommend it always. And so we're also kind of choosy about what projects are a good fit for what we can do. Yeah.
And David, would you like to add anything on top of that?
No, I think that's perfect. That's exactly what I was like. I would second that as well.
Well, thanks a lot for participating today, and thanks our guest speakers for your amazing presentations, as well as all the answers to our audiences. So before we're signing out, I'd like everyone to stay for a second to take a photo together. And if you can turn on your camera, that would be wonderful. Okay, please turn on your camera so we can take a photo together. Taking a second for everyone to get their camera on. Okay, I think a couple of our audiences are shy today, like haven't prepared for like the video. We'll say cheese. 1, 2, 3, cheese. Okay, one more time. 1, 2, 3, cheese. Hey, well, thanks a lot, everyone, for today. And please, if you have a minute, please send us more feedback so we can improve our next event, and we'll update more about the new events on climate change entrepreneurship hub.
Thank you so much.
I love it. Cheese. Yep.
Trees. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.